So when I was 12 years old, my folks, we lived in about a 1,400 square foot little ranch house out in the South Bay area of Los Angeles. And they decided to remodel it, and they built it into a sort of 3,000 square foot or 3,500 square foot modern ranch home. And the whole process was completely fascinating, right? There were trucks with oozing concrete pouring into trenches. There were people sawing lumber, and that smell and sawdust everywhere. I was really pretty taken as a young boy. And so one day I saw this gentleman walking along, and he had a big roll of plans in his hands, and he was pointing. And I said, "Well, who's that? What's he doing?" It's, "Well, that's the architect." I thought that was pretty cool. I didn't even know what it meant, but it looked cool to me. And so later that evening, I kind of stole the plans, the contractor's plans out of his shed, and I drew all over them. And, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what possessed me, but I got up the next morning, and the contractor was yelling at my dad, and he basically was, "Those are my only set of plans." And my dad turned around to me and he said, "When I get home, you and I are going to have a talk." So that was a tough day. It went by real slowly. He got home in the late afternoon and he said, "Come with me." And we went around the back of his car. We pulled a big box out, brought it inside and opened it up and set it up. It was a drafting table and a T-square and a stool. And he said, "If you're going to draw, you'll draw right here." And that was it for me. That's what I did. I never looked back. So ever since I was 12 years old, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. There was no doubt in my mind. And I can still vividly picture the whole scenario, especially the contractor yelling at me. It was not pretty. But that was my introduction.
That's crazy.
So did the house turn out weird because of your scribble on the plans?
Right. Yeah. It did. It looked a little bit like a Frank Gehry ranch home. No, it didn't. But it was, I will tell you, it was quite a contemporary remodel. Floor to ceiling glass, sliding glass doors. And they this is an area with equestrian area with ranch homes. And my folks sort of went for it. Looking back, It was really rather interesting. It was a very modern take on a classic California kind of Cliff May ranch home. And I'm certain to this day that had a lot of influence as well, because I ended up at USC in the architecture school, which has a really rich history of modernism. In fact, in last century, the case study movement, you'll recall the case study homes and John Intenza in Art and Architecture magazine. Of the 22 case study homes that were built, half of them, 11 of them, were done by USC grads or professors.
Really?
And so and it's always been, whether it's Pierre Koenig or Raphael Soriano or a whole host of folks that came after them, Buff and Hensman, Carl Masterson. There was really quite a legacy there. So in a lot of ways, between that modern ranch home and my schooling at the architecture school at USC, the modernist in me has always been there. And that's predominantly, I think, why you see in our product that modern, we call it warm modernism, but it's very much a legacy. I sometimes say we're just carrying the torch on. They carried it first. It went on to the Stephen Ehrlichs and others, and we're carrying the torch for a bit, and we're probably passing it along as we speak as well. But I think it's very exciting. It's very endearing. It's very authentic to be a part of that modernist residential movement that's been going on now for close to 100 years.
It's really fascinating that history of the modern residential architecture, and it never really occurred to me quite clearly how many of those folks had ties to USC. But when I think about it,
Well, it's a school it's interesting because it bridges kind of the gap of other schools. So you may have, SciArc over on one end that's very theoretical
Sure.
and highly conceptual based. Then you might have Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, who is a phenomenally, high end tech school. They're preparing people right out of the chute. And USC's bridged that gap for a lot of years in between. There's quite a bit of both, but predominantly it's a design first pedagogy and system, and the instructors and if you finally have heard, Tom Main has talked about it for years. In fact, I was in a forum with Tom Main actually just last week, and he was talking about the school and its legacy and the guild. The Architectural Guild of the school is an alumni support group, and it's really the only one of its kind. It's absolutely huge and has a network all over the nation and beyond, well beyond. It puts on the guild dinner every year with 600-700 people, and it's really kind of a terrific industry event that's not at all only USC. It's very broad and inclusive. And then, you've got Frank Gehry, who we've been trying to get Frank to do a building on campus for as long as I've been involved with the school on the board of counselors, probably close to 30 years now. I think we're close. We're going to get a Hail Mary from Frank in our digital lab, coming up here. So there's a very, very rich legacy of talent and influence on Los Angeles, Southern California, and beyond that's come from that school.
From what I know of USC, I think you're correct that it's a very good, I wouldn't say middle of the road because that makes it sound generic, but it's good at spanning both the theoretical and practical in a certain sense, and design comes first from what I've seen. And I I used to teach architecture for a period of time, and I kind of like that in an undergraduate school, at least, because it gives students the ability to sort of find a little bit more of their own path rather than being pigeonholed from day one because they've chosen a hyper-specific school when they're like 17 years old,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, David. It does kind of bridge that. It's 750 students. It's one of the largest architecture schools in the nation. Mm-hmm. The undergraduate program comprises the vast majority of that. But there's 4 different graduate programs too. And one of the ones that I'm very involved with is the Landscape Architecture and Urbanism program. The Masters of Landscape Architecture and Urbanism is run by Allison Hirsch, and she is just amazing. And she has a core group of lieutenants who are all Esther Margulies and some really top flight talent in the business, and they're deeply engaged into, you name it. If there's a landscape architecture firm here, it's Mark Rios, Pamela Burton, Mia Lair. They're all fully engaged with all aspects. And because the program is so progressive and the challenges are so formidable right now between sustainability and urbanism, diversity, there's a lot of interesting challenges, and the landscape program is right at the forefront of it. Whether it's the LA River Project or the future of sustainability and all these really interesting processes or challenges that are going on. They have people and programs infused to create everything from theory to solutions and everything in between. So it's exciting. We're always right now. There's all this fear, right? We're living at one of the most difficult times ever, and the reality is that that's not true. The reality is that this is by far the finest time ever to have been a human being. By almost any metric you could possibly consider, this is the greatest time that we as human beings could exist. Now you may say, well, wait a minute, what about environmental? What about this planet? And the fact is, yeah, there are some serious issues, but there are also some very serious momentum, people, money, and theories that are being applied, and they're being applied in incredible, diverse ways to solve some of these big issues. And what do human beings do? We solve big issues. We do it all the time. It just doesn't make the daily news, or it doesn't come in 144 characters. It's going on all the time. We've always done it for millennia. And, when it comes to, I would say, did you know that 150 years ago, there was only one country that allowed women to vote? 194 countries around the globe. And today, do you know what the number is? How many countries allow women to vote?
Oh, I have no idea. More
it's
than that, but
193.
93?
193.
Oh,
only
okay.
one country, only one doesn't allow women to vote. And you could go on and on. Hunger, aviation accidents, things that we're always worried about have massive improvement around the globe. So it's definitely time to change the narrative, because there are a lot of very exciting things happening. And getting back to the landscape program, I really believe that program is, we're better to have such a serious think tank about the environment than in Los Angeles, downtown, and the ripple effect of the talent and the students that are going to come out of there. It's exciting.
There's certainly an optimist perspective.
I was going to say.
with the school, yes, but also back to what you're talking about as far as the positive news and positive things are happening. I think it's difficult for a lot of people because negative news tends to spread faster, and news outlets know that. And when you tweet the 140 or 240, whatever it is, characters, it's that kind of stuff that gets traction. And perhaps for those reasons, it's easy for most to feel bogged down by that information rather than the things you're describing.
Yeah. No, and you can't blame the press or the media. That doesn't, they're only the conduit. It's what people want. And,
Sure.
In the end, we're built, human beings are built for fight or flight and built for stress. We're built to be stressed out animals. And you know what? There's not a whole lot to be stressed about anymore. Food, clothing, shelter, these things for 90+% of the world, these are abundant and ubiquitous. And I'm not trying to homogenize everything, but it's difficult for us as human beings to find stress. And what do? We like the car crash. We don't watch the whole race for the race. We watch it for the train wreck.
Right.
And that's what that's what sells on the news. It's what makes us feel better somehow to see the strife around us. So we're up against formidable odds because we're sort of self-inflicting, society's ills. I mean, and the other thing that we're really good at as human beings is we forget. It's very, very easy and even part of our DNA to forget things, especially generationally. So when we look back, we think, oh, this is the most polarized time in America's history. And the next generation, my kids, they think this country is just all, backwards, crazy, not good. And, oh man, first of all, we need to, let's compare apples to apples and other countries that are out there. And secondly, let's not forget there are plenty of periods of time where the country goes through political strife and polarization. Some classic ones that were likely deeper than where we are now.
Sure.
Hard to believe.
Yeah.
But we're very, very good at forgetting things and then therefore having to learn lessons over again. And that doesn't just apply to Americans, as we well know.
Sure. I mean, your point about the number of countries where women were allowed to vote. 150 years is what you said. It's not that long ago, really. I mean,
Right.
it is, but it's also like a blink of an eye. It's kind of remarkable. I want to go back to the story about you drawing on those CDs. Well, my first question is, do you have photographs or images of that? Because that would be a remarkable thing to see.
Oh gosh, no, I don't. Yeah, that would be fun. I certainly can, close my eyes and see it, but I don't have any pictures of that. No.
That'd be pretty good. And so, why were your parents interested in doing a modern house or a modern take on what the house was? Were they creatives, designers, architects, or anything of that sort? Or
So my father was an attorney, a probate attorney, family law, and I didn't get my creative genes from him. My mother was a singer. She was an opera singer, a mezzo soprano. And she was quite accomplished. She sang all over the world. She sang quite a bit with the LA Philharmonic. Zubin Mehta was the conductor back then. I remember him being at the house, and they're doing practices and things. And so, yeah, she was the creative. She was the driving force behind the remodel. She hired a architect his name was Corwin Ebertine, and he was a modernist coming out of that sort of mid-century arena. This is the mid-70s. And he pushed the agenda a bit. And then she also had a designer. Her name was Nancy Conover, and she was rather progressive too. So I think at the time it was my mother who was mostly behind pushing this, and that's where my middle name Camden comes from. That's her maiden name. And that's why I used that name, because she asked me and I told her I would. I told her I'd use that name forevermore.
That's lovely. So once that process happened, you felt pretty convinced this is your path. Was there ever a moment where, like during high school when you're getting ready to go to college, where you thought maybe I'll venture off into a different type of design profession or study, like landscape architecture, for example, or industrial design at the other end?
Absolutely not. No wavering. No wavering whatsoever. Landscape architecture, I don't believe there was a program then.
Yeah.
For me, the rather conventional path to becoming an architect, if you could even call it that, was always the goal. I did witness all around me friends and colleagues at the school that had a lot more fun, that maybe weren't up as late at night. But I managed to balance it pretty good. There was maybe a slight period of time just as the program started that I may have had a bit of a doubt, and that's when. So our first year instructor at the School of Architecture at that time was Ed Niles. I don't know if you know his work.
The name is familiar.
Extreme modernist based out of Malibu. Does almost spaceship-like homes and buildings. Really interesting. Very crafted, but Ed was notoriously one of those instructors that you sort of remember. And our first project, our first assignment was a pavilion in Exposition Park. And I will admit, as I was finishing putting my careful balsa wood model together, that it was a pretty lousy design. Ed came up beside me, and it's just like 3 weeks into the program, and he says, "Kirkpatrick, what is this?" And I said, "This is the model for my pavilion." He shakes his head, takes the model off the desk, puts it on the floor, and he steps on it.
Oh, God.
Yeah, no joke. And he said, "You know what? You frat boys are never going to make it in this program. You might as well just get over to the business school right now." And I couldn't believe it. I mean, I knew he was notorious for being tough, but that seemed bordering on abusive, right? I mean, I'm not even sure you could do that today.
I don't think you
It
can.
happens.
Right.
Yeah.
But and I actually told this story at graduation because I did speak at our graduation. He and I did tell him, I thanked him. I said, do you mind coming up here for a minute, Ed? Because you were the one that made me persevere. Because it's not a 5-year easy road, right? You guys know. And so things happen, and you gotta. I mean, he was right. I will tell you, he was right. I'm not sure it was the right thing to do, but it was pretty bad, and I needed to up my game. So it was a good lesson, and forced me to up my game.
That's interesting. I feel like a lot of architects have similar stories, have witnessed that throughout school. It reminds me, actually, for myself, I never had anyone squish my model, but I did have a teacher. This was during second year, and it was like very abstract work, which is sometimes the most difficult when you're new to doing architecture or design. We had like a 1-week project. You had to build this small model study thing, and I did this very, very small cardboard model that was really basic, and there was not much to it at all. And the teacher came over, and she looked at it, and she was just super quiet the entire time. And of course, when you're that young, you're wondering, what are they thinking? What are they going to say? And she simply like kind of tilted her head, and she said, "I'm disappointed." And then she walked away. And it was the most crushing thing because I was used to not being the disappointing student. But I will say that it was extremely motivating. And
you remember.
I remember that. And that project, I worked really hard, and it worked out well. And it wouldn't have if I hadn't been, kind of reprimanded or whatever you would call it.
Yeah. Those are two different forms of tough love right there.
It's tough. It's tough. So the USC is a 5-year program, right? You were there. And
yes.
What's interesting is that you became licensed at a very young age.
I did. We had a group, I think there were 6 or 8 of us that were pretty good friends at the school. And we all decided that it would be good if we started taking the board exam right away. Mm-hmm. A lot of that information is fresh. So, and most of us had been working, part-time, either summers or prior or during. They don't really recommend that because there's kind of a lot of professional practice aspects to the board exams. So at that time, it was 9 exams, and usually spread. Yeah, there were 9 different exams. And then there was the final, the 9th exam was 1 day, 12 hours, design a building. Mm-hmm. You had 12 hours to design the building, 8 to 8 in the morning to 8 at night. And we just got in our minds that we were gonna buckle down right after and right before we started working and take the test. So we went to Mexico. One of the guys, his uncle or something, had a place outside of Puerto Vallarta, and we all went down there. Needless to say, we did not get a lot done in Puerto Vallarta, but we had a lot of fun, and it's a good group that we're all still in touch with today. We did go ahead and take the exams, and I passed a couple of them the first round. I think I got 2 out of 7. And the next year, I think I got clicked a few more off, and then I took the design exam, and thank goodness passed that one. But it was something that I thought, if we leave this out there too long, it's going to be difficult. You also have a certain number of years of working apprenticeship that before you can be licensed. So it's the exam plus the apprenticeship. Mm-hmm. And then you have an oral interview. They don't do this anymore, but it used to be you would sit down in a room in front of 3 old white guys, right? Of course. And they would ask you questions, and mostly trying to get you to fumble up. But somehow I sneaked through that one, and I was licensed, I think, at 24. Mm-hmm. Which ended up helping me because I, 2 years into working for a firm in Santa Monica, I had a commission for a very large residents come to my attention. I brought it to my boss at the time, but he didn't want to do it. So I gave notice, and that's how KAA started.
Wow. Wow.
So did you always know that you would go on your own at some point?
I don't recall that, Marina. I don't remember if I was thinking that way or not. I probably was always very entrepreneurial. And I give my older brother, a lot of credit for that too. He was always pushing me. He was the one at college who pushed me to take business classes and get a business minor.
Wow.
He said, boy, if you're ever going to run your own business, you're going to need to talk the language of business. So I took finance and accounting and marketing and all that. And I didn't like it much, but I took it. And yeah, I will say to this day, that still serves me well. I've always been able to, understand the business side of things, even with clients. I kind of make it a point to understand their business, what they do, how they go about it, be able to talk that talk a little bit, because they enjoy that, and there's some respect there, because you're certainly giving them lots of knowledge about your business, our business, right? But yeah, I when that opportunity came along, I didn't want to pass it up. It was a 12,000 square foot residence out in Sherman Oaks, and yeah, little did I know that it would be a 5+ year project. Actually, went for even longer, and that of course the client was this was their job. This house was their job.
I see. I was going to ask, why did it take 5.5 years? But as soon as you say it's the client's job, then it's like,
I like to say we built that house 3 times. We really did. I mean, everything that was put up was taken down at least twice.
Wow.
Didn't matter if it was the framing or the details or whatever it was. It took me many years to figure out why that was the case. She was a very sweet person. But when it came to the project and being on site, she was a tyrant. And it turns out that you guys will laugh because you'll know the story. But her husband was a very busy businessman, traveled everywhere. This house was her job. She didn't have any other meaningful engagement. This was her meaningful engagement. And the threat of this house being done and actually moving in meant the end of her job. So there were sometimes, there was one day when, and by the way, she went through 9 different interior designers. I don't know how I ended up being the architect the whole time. It was, I still don't understand that. But yeah, and the poor contractor, the contractor did eventually finish the job, but it was his last job. He retired.
At the age of 45, he retired. I'm done.
Yeah. We had, 7, 8 people that would meet every Thursday and walk the site, and she would point stuff out that she didn't like. And so one day we're in the dining room, and there's this elaborately coffered ceiling that goes around the edge, built-in lighting, all this interesting stuff. It was about 2/3 done. And she walked in and she said, "I don't like it. Take it out." And I could see Phil, the contractor's eye. He said, "But Carol, I mean, the amount of time and labor and craftsmanship that's gone into all these moldings and forms." And she goes, "Phil, don't argue with me." I said, "Take it out." And I looked at Phil and I looked at her and I said, "You know what? Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Let's move on." So we go into the next room, and later that afternoon, Phil corners me and he goes, "Grant, we can't take that down. That's an extraordinary amount of work. And your drawings right here, we built it off your drawings. She approved them. And I'm not going to do it." I said, "Phil, don't worry about it. Let me handle this, okay?" And he said, "All right." So following Thursday, we're walking through, we get into the dining room. Before she could say anything, I said, "Carol, what do you think now?" And she said, "Much better." And I look over at Phil. Not a thing had been done. Not one piece of molding. Nothing had been done.
Yeah.
But it took me 5 years to catch on to that game. And Yeah, it was a rough road, but we persevered, and that job, which was job number 8801, was complete somewhere in the mid 90s.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
There are a lot of crazy architecture stories. That's a pretty wild one, though. I mean, I guess
I feel like I've heard that type of story with clients saying those types of things to a certain degree.
Right.
But that's, I mean, if it's
Yeah.
your first project too, and it's such a a 12,000 square foot home, it's pretty good
It's big.
size. Like, yeah, I don't know how you can.
well,
how
I
you
hope everyone
manage
was
to,
compensated at least, and it wasn't like.
Yeah, no, that was never an issue. The
That's good.
compensation was an issue, but when you guys know, when you do these things, you put your heart and soul into them, and you can get paid for them. But if they don't get built, or they're not built right, it's very deflating.
Yeah.
And I have a partner here who he does all of our classical and traditional work. So our firm, KAA Design, we do only custom residences, and I can tell you the reason for that. Different story. But we also, my partner runs a boutique shop within the firm that does classical and traditional work called Evans Architects, Eric Evans. And he has one gentleman on his team who's a fabulous young architect, terrific guy. And I think he's been with us for 5 years now. And the projects that he's been on, I have one way or another have been stopped or sold or whatever. For whatever reason, the poor guy is been a little bit changed, and just had another one stop for cost reasons. You guys probably know as well as anyone right now that costs are it's crazy, out of hand right now. I think we're in an extreme bubble. At least I hope so, because it really is a crazy inflated market right now for pricing of custom homes. But anyway, it's it has nothing to do with him. It's a little bit of luck of the draw. Looking forward to getting him out on the job with a project that's actually going up.
I'm sure he's looking forward to that too. It's I think something that maybe non-architects forget or don't understand, non-architects and non-contractors, people that are not in profession, is that none of us do this. First of all, none of us do this primarily for the money, because there's probably easier ways to make just as much or more. And none of us do this to stay in the theoretical space. Like, it's not satisfying to go through an entire house, even if you're paid very well, and not have it built, or have it built poorly, or whatever it might be. Like, and I think it's difficult for maybe people to understand with architects, because a lot of our heavy lifting happens in the conceptual space, like in drawing form and model form on the computer and whatnot. But that's not, I mean, for us, that's just a means. That's just the stepping stone to the final thing. And
no, it absolutely does. We were propositioned, we have been many times for work in China, especially that recession, 2008, 2011, that stretch in there, which was tough times. And we came close to doing some of that, but two interesting things happened. One, the fellow architect not too far from here, who we keep in touch on things, we were talking one day. He's been doing a lot of work over in China, and he said, "If you don't have to do it, don't do it." I said, "Well, what do you mean, Dion?" And he says, "Well, the Chinese, they really want an American flavor to the work. They hire a ton of architects out of Orange County, and then when they're going to some higher end projects, they want some really cutting edge architecture. So they'll approach you and you'll do the design work, but A, you won't get paid for 6 months, and that's only after you beg, and B, the work won't be completed as you designed it. We get out there and there, the shell of the building's up and looks like it's going to be right. Then you get inside and there's a duct going down the corner for the roof drain, right where these two materials are supposed to meet in the right way. And, that kind of a thing. So, and there was another time I'm sitting at a meeting with Ron Altoon and Porter Architects. And Ron's a veteran of the business. Actually, he was national AIA president, I think 2005 or so. Anyway, his firm does work all over, and I was sitting next to him. He has his calendar out, his old analog, flip calendar. And on the monthly view, there are 3 bold colored lines. And, there's like orange, blue, and green. And the blue lines fill up a good portion of the month. The green lines are a week here or there. And then the orange lines are a day or two. And I said, well, so what's what? And he said, well, the orange lines are when I'm home. The green lines are domestic travel, and the blue lines are China.
Wow.
He said, when we were struggling in 2008 and 2009, we took on a lot of work in China, and now more than half our work is China based. He looked at me and said, Grant, don't do it. If you don't have to, don't take the China route to keep your firm alive. Scale back, do whatever it takes. Yeah, because the first trip is fun. The second trip is like, oh, okay. And then everyone thereafter is just a grind.
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
Right?
I only think traveling like that, especially that far, that's about as far as you can go, really, maybe except Australia, would only be worth it if it's like a unicorn project and it's, it's good design, it's going to be executed and all that, then fine. But if there are the things that you described happening, it's soul sucking. It sort of reminds me, it's funny, on the show we talked to a lot of architects. And one question we asked is, what kinds of projects do you aspire to do, or what do you look for in a good project? And the answer, there's multiple answers within each of the people, but inevitably one of them is the client. Like, if it's not a good person, if they're going to be shady, if they're not going to understand certain things, it's not worth the time and the headache, because these projects also, we're not talking about a 3-month engagement or a 2-month engagement. You're talking about, for the homes you do, I'd imagine, well, I guess 5.5 years for the first one, but I mean, the ones these days, probably 3 years or so, right?
Well, no, it is closer to 4 or 5 years. When you think about it, you're a year in design and another 6 months plus on top of that for entitlements, the way those things are now today. And then, you're 2.5 to 3.5 years in construction. So, it's a 4 or 5 year relationship for sure.
You had mentioned a moment ago that you guys focus only on custom homes. And what's the reason for that? Yeah.
So we used to have 5 different divisions here at KAA, and KAA stands for Kirkpatrick Associates Architects. But we got rid of that a while back because it was really more of a design house, and it didn't need my name or anybody's name on the door. It was a cadre of talent. And so our 5 divisions were, of course, architecture, landscape architecture, interior design, product design, and branding.
Wow.
And there was 85 of us, and we were cranking on all kinds of things. A lot of our work was furniture, prefab home line, lighting lines. We did a lot of product, and we branded it all. And we had this terrific director, Melanie Robinson, who's just she's an architect out of Canada, but a branding genius. And so clients came to us to name their projects. If we were doing a mixed use project, or we were doing a restaurant from scratch. So we would take them through the visioning and the naming process and all of the brand platform and outreach, build their websites. I mean, we did everything. And it was very exciting, but inevitably I was running 5 different businesses. Yeah. I mean, there were 5 unique businesses, the heads of which all reported to me. And although it was exciting, we had a line of prefab homes, as I said. So we did the branding and the whole package on that. We designed them both inside and outside. We did had a whole product line set up with them. It was all the furniture. It was terrific. In fact, we were at Dwell on Design, the big show at the LA Convention Center, with a 1,000 square foot 2-bedroom, 2-bath prefab with all the decks and furniture and everything. we brought in trees, and I think we remain today the single largest SKU that has been in the convention center. And it was very exciting. But inevitably, I was running a firm and not doing any design work. It was a real struggle for me. And so then when the recession came along, here again, 2008, we had to pull back. We were a decent sized shop doing a lot of different things. The architecture was always doing well. The landscape architecture was always doing well. The interior design was up and down. We had 3 different directors for our interiors over the years. The product group, we did some great stuff. We had a big line of furniture called the Rusa Collection at Design Within Reach. There's 18 different SKUs, and it was their top seller for 3 years there. And then, the prefab home thing was dead in the water. No one's ever been able to crack that nut. And I can tell you why. It has to do with the financing market. But us architects all have to try it. I guess we just have to get it out of our system somehow. But we over 3 following years, 2009, 10, 11, we peeled back. And the last peel back, we had gone from 85 people to 25 people.
Wow.
The 25 of us were the architecture team that was still doing okay, being profitable with custom homes. And that's when Eric and Duan and I decided, we were put here. We've always done custom homes right from the beginning, as we talked about. Yeah. It's the thing we've done best. We have the most license and get the biggest kicks out of it. We're the most successful with it. I think we should just buckle down and do what we're good at. It's what we were here to put on earth for. And so we went back to just architecture. We quickly realized that in jettisoning our landscape architecture team, that was a mistake, because most of our clients have us do the landscape architecture, and we're at our best when we're approaching a project holistically. The whole property, not just a house or a building on the property. Mm-hmm. So we brought our landscape team back after about 4 months, and and that's what we've done ever since. We've just focused on custom homes. We get asked to do a lot of different things all the time, and including speculative homes or things of that nature. But our system is very geared to one-off homes. We always say our projects are usually a very unique piece of property and a client who wants to do something very unique on it. And that's where we come in. So it's been great. Here I am at 58, and I kind of get it. I get what I'm here for. We're, in a space, in a certain part of the world that is absolutely crazy opportunity for doing this, for people who have unique properties and want to do terrific homes on them. We love it. We have a very one-off approach, a process for each of them that the clients love, and we love to take them through it. Everything we do is different. It's kind of a lousy way to run a business, but it's fun to get up in the morning. But yeah, that's how we got to just focusing on custom homes.
Was there ever a time that you thought you'd bring back the interior design component into the office?
Yeah, that's a great question, David. The answer is no, there was never a time. And the reason is because once we jettisoned the interiors, we realized that a couple of things. One, the reason a client hires an architect and the reason they hire an interior designer are 2 very different things, right? It would be, if you're in a market where you just want to do the best work possible. So for us, that means, the architecture and the landscape at the highest level for this particular property and client. The chances that our interior designer is the right one for that project and for them is very slim. Out of all the fabulous interior designers that are out there, what we want our client to do is find the perfect one for them. And we're often in a position where we're helping them do that. Frankly, it's a part of the process I kind of like. It's very time consuming, but as you guys know, when you're when you're building a team for a special project, you want the right designer, you want the right contractor, and you put that team together for all the reasons that have mostly to do with the vision for the project and how that client is and wants to work.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a time for us to kind of circle back and re-engage with the great designers that are out there. And now, I mean, our designers, the interior designers we're working with, they're, two in New York, one out of London. We're just working with some incredible interior designers that are doing fabulous things. We bring them in very early, so they're part of the visioning and part of the authoring of the initial vision. And for some architects, that's a real conflict. Architects kind of notoriously we want to hold our ground, and it's our way, and then they come in and put some furniture in and some drapes on the wall. But the most of the homes we do, it's not like that. It's a very holistic, integrated process that's ascribing to something really special, and the talent that's involved on the interior side. It's amazing what's out there and what they do. By the way, procuring. The reason why most interior designers have a store is because that's all the furniture that got rejected somehow from their clients, and they've got to sell it. They own it. And I think we just got rid of our last piece of furniture here last year from our interiors division 10 years ago.
Yeah,
I'm serious.
Yeah, what you're saying makes sense. I can understand that. I think it's that potential friction between interior designers or any other designers, frankly, on a project and an architect. It happens for sure. It also mostly it's about just preventing that situation by finding the right people. If you don't have the right people, there's not much you can do to have that relationship work.
Yeah, and that's we're really lucky here. Our firm is most of the people here have been here for quite a while, 10, 15, 20 years. Steve, my associate's been here 33 years.
Wow.
My two partners are 25 years. All our project managers are 10, 15, 20 plus years. It's a very, very mature group. And right now, it's very interesting. We were in an office down the street here in Marina Del Rey for 20 years. And we had to leave. It was we had a 20-year lease, and it worked out great. It's a great spot, but they deserve to lease it at a much higher rate than they were leasing to us, as all around us became Silicon Beach at $5 or $6 a foot. So we moved here to this building on Washington, which is fabulous. We love it, but that was during the pandemic, and our firm has gone to a total flex location policy, which means work from wherever you work best. Starbucks, your living room, here, whatever. And the reason for that is because during the pandemic, we were incredibly efficient and effective. That 2+ years, and I'm describing like it's gone, but it does seem to be winnowing a bit. But the firm has never been so effective and efficient in what we do, and it would be very difficult to ask everybody to come back full time here. It'd be a little bit insincere. So we have about maybe roughly a third of our staff that's here every day. That includes myself. I love being here. And about a third of our staff that's in and out all the time, and about a third that just loves working from home. And you know what? God bless them. They're cranking. The technology has allowed us to do things like we're doing right now, to be face to face and get things done. We installed overhead cameras in our conference rooms, so that in addition to all the monitors, as we're drawing or sketching during a meeting, the interior designer in New York they can see whatever's going on, we're just getting things done like crazy. And I think ultimately people, if they're not commuting, meetings are shorter when they're on Zoom. They just are.
Yeah.
Clients have different expectations. We do have our clients come to the office a lot because, the whole room is set up as their environment and it's fruitful. But everybody is, it seems like everything's a little bit quicker, shorter, and more effective. The only downside has been mentorship of younger staff, right? You kind of miss those opportunities that are more ad hoc or spontaneous to say, hey, that's one way of doing it, but you can consider this as well. Or why don't you just step in here? Let me just, while we're talking and sketching on this. And those kinds of things are obviously a little more challenging when you're remote. But here's what I've learned. The amount of meetings, both client meetings and design forums, that our most junior staff are involved in now is absolutely mind-boggling. Right? I don't know about you guys, but when I first started out after school at my job, I wasn't in client meetings. I wasn't in internal team design meetings. I was cranking on stairs and bathroom layouts and, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Today, because the younger staff are the ones who are mostly driving the model, they're driving the BIM model, and that BIM model is happening, from the get-go, even if it's a highly conceptual stage of the project. It is that 3D informed model that is really the crux of all the forums, whether it's an internal design forum or a client meeting. So these young staff, they're in these meetings. They're seeing how it goes, how the meetings are run, how the interactions with the clients are done. And I frankly have to believe that is a far bigger benefit than missing out on the spontaneous, mentoring. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't like them both, but I think there's pros and cons to most everything. And so even that is got some plus side coming out of this. But we'll see. For us, what we've said is, look, you guys have all done great. We trust you. We're going to carry on with the way it's been going because it's working. If it stops working, we'll talk.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the question of what percentage of people are working in the office versus not is an interesting one, but it's not like anyone's stuck to what they've committed to for the moment. And just switch it up later on if you need to. And so do you find it's easier for younger employers and interns and things like that to be involved in those meetings when they are maybe remote because things are more efficient?
Yes, I do. I think it's largely technology based. What's happening now is obviously that same model is doing everything from, printing out presentation drawings or pushing through to various rendering engines or spitting out a 3D model or going into our VR system here when the client comes in. It's all the same. So all the energy is going into these models. And as we keep, for better or worse, graduating to different apps or different software platforms, different rendering engines that keep getting better and better, that model becomes more and more important. And we've got some really interesting ways of using the technology from the conceptual level. And most of us now are, in fact, we pretty much run off a Morpholio. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that app. So most everyone here is using Morpholio to create. We still have a few sketch paper rolls in the drawers here, but it's unbelievable. And you can cast off your iPad. Someone could sit in this room and say, well, here, I'm casting to monitor 2 and someone's on monitor 4. We're going back and forth and they're sketching live and it's just amazing. And someone could be at home and someone could be at the coffee shop. And so in a lot of ways, I will say that like even during the meeting, if we're in a meeting, this actually just happened on Monday, had a meeting on a big project we're working on, clients in, designers from New York are up on the screen. Several staff members are at home, several are here, complete hybrid meeting, right? And at any one time, Kyle, the project coordinator, he is running, he's running the computer model. He's flipping back and forth between the Zoom screen and the overhead cameras. He's dialing into Google Earth to put the panorama on. It's I could never do it. I get to turn on my iPad and it's all good. But these are the kinds of things where these guys that are our younger staff, they're just amazing, absolutely amazing. It's second nature to them, right? So, and we've really embraced that. We've got one of our senior associates here, Megan Beckman. She is our CTO. She directs all of our technology, and we have a process, or it's a platform where we're always pushing on the application of technology. We do a little bit of prototyping stuff. We had a coder in over the summer who Megan worked with to code some. So we use like Miro board and some of these other platforms so everybody can be together, and they're stringing some code for streamlining some of our processes, making them more efficient. But most of the time, we're just trying to pick up on the latest technology that's out there, or keep up with our technology. For instance, we're on ArchiCAD, and I think ArchiCAD's on. We just went on ArchiCAD 25, and of course 26 is about to come out. So,
well, they release it once a year now. It's like, okay.
yeah. And just when you're getting the last one, filtered through. But, bottom line is we have a technical director. It's a full-time job. She has a staff both on board and out of the office. And just keeping up with the technology and pushing the technology has it's a very important part of our agenda and how we're working. Because as a firm, we don't plan to expand. We're about 40-something people. We've been that way for a long time between our architects and our landscape group. And, we do maybe 10 to 15 projects at a time, not in construction, but in design with 3 different partners. Some of them are quite large, but some of our beach houses and some of them are castles. They just don't look like what you think they look like anymore. But the technology is what enables us to continually get more efficient, and also to get our clients in a position where they can make decisions, right? That's the key thing in our business. If the client can not only make decisions, but even more importantly, keep their decision, then your project flows. So we have this. I'll often tell my clients, we'll make you great decision makers. All the options will be there. They'll be boiled down into 3. You'll make a great decision, but I can't make you a good decision keeper. That's up to you.
Yeah.
And as soon as they start to understand that, then they realize it really is, once you make that decision, make sure it's fully vetted and that you can stand behind it, so you're not reconsidering it later. Because that's where things, especially on an emotional project like a custom home, that's where it can get dicey.
That's a very, very good point. And it's an interesting one. It's amazing to hear that your office thinks so much about technology and the process of how you guys operate and how you work. It seems like I feel like a lot of offices, they have a BIM manager, they have X, Y, and Z, but it's more from a point of like just necessity.
Just
like we have to have it, to kind of bridge this gap, and okay, it's working, okay, fine. But it sounds like it's much more in the forefront of your thinking than being this annoying thing you have to deal with.
Yeah, there's a reason why we anointed her the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer. We wanted to recognize that technology is one of the essence. It's one of the main ingredients of the firm's operation. And advancing that, there's two different forms. There is the maintenance, the upgrades, the constant, battle of keeping technology clean and non-compromised and all of that. But there's also the advancement. There's looking as what's out there, what's going on in the profession. How can we contribute to what's going on out there in the profession? That's really important. It's also, if you think about it, as I mentioned before, the younger generation of architects are really into it. They know that that's the future, and when they see a firm that is standing behind that as a main mantra of the vision of the company, then that's attractive as well. So there's a lot of good reasons, and plus it's just exciting. I mean, the whole revolution of going from pen and paper and trace to sketching on with Morpholio on the iPad for everything is a complete game changer. It's really fun.
I think technology had to do that so kids would not draw on contractors' construction sets anymore. But
can you imagine having an iPad?
Oh gosh, I can imagine having an iPad and a kid just grab it.
Yeah. But I was out on a job site recently, and there's a subcontractor. He's down next to the sill on the bottom of the door system, and he's looking at his iPad. And I look over. He's pulled the detail up out of the computer model as to what's going on right there. So he makes sure he's getting the waterproofing right and that kind of a thing. And it's pretty amazing. He's not looking at a set of plans. He's looking at his iPad.
What was I going to say about the technology?
I was wondering if you...
David, can
Yeah.
Sorry, you guys, I'm going to run out of power. It says 16%. Can we just do a quick break and I can get a power strip?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Is that cool?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Give me a second here. I'll be right back.
No problem. One last quick thing about the tech, which, by the way, we use ArchiCAD as well. And every time we meet someone who uses ArchiCAD, I'm very excited because a lot of people use Revit.
We're big ArchiCAD fans. We've been on it for a long time. It's just more Mac-based. We've been Mac-based for a while. And I mean, if you really get into it and embrace it, it's pretty terrific.
Yeah. My question was, how do you guys use Morpholio in conjunction with or in relationship to other programs like ArchiCAD? Is Morpholio mainly used as an overlay like Trace for sketching and more concept that kind of work?
Yeah. No, it definitely, I don't know that it interfaces directly with ArchiCAD, but we use Morpholio for all things design. So initial sketching, sometimes even presentation sketching. There's a couple folks here who have gotten really, really good with the tools and the palettes, and they're producing client-worthy sketches that come right off. And then typically we'll, if we put up a client presentation together, we'll just import from that. And if it's live, it may be on Miro or, we use Twinmotion and a couple other rendering engines for various aspects of that conceptual process. And eventually, we get into Studio Max and some other, pretty capable rendering engines.
Oh, you guys are locked in. The other thing I was going to ask is, you had mentioned that with the type of work you do, every project is unique and it's meant to be unique. And you said kind of jokingly that it's sort of a terrible business model because it's not the same product that's just being repeated all the time. So I guess the question is, like, how do you stay efficient and profitable and all those things, but efficient from a process standpoint when every project is meant to be different? Because it could, on paper, sort of, it sounds like two opposing ideas in a way.
Yeah, it's very simple. You just charge a lot.
Yeah.
I'm obviously kidding about that. Although I will say that to do this kind of work, you do need to charge the right amount that allows you the freedom and the time to create these things. I mean, it's funny, I think they built the 73-story Korean tower downtown in 18 months. And, our projects take 3 years to build. And that could be very frustrating, but if you watch it, if you watch the process, if you watch the layers and the craftsmanship and what's going on, you realize you're not putting one floor on top of another and skinning it. You're building something incredibly detailed and crafted. And our clients want that. And they're willing to go through what it takes to get to that. And to do that, we have to have the kind of compensation model that allows us the ability to create a one-off product with 150 sheets in a set that don't give the contractor much option, right?
Right.
But the more to your point or your question, there are quite a few ways and means and processes that we have developed to be efficient with that. Yes, every project is a one-off, but there are a lot of components to both the process and the product that come from another. And so we're constantly, like our project delivery system, it is a system. It has a set of criteria at different stages, and it is set to build success at various different points for both the team and for the client and project. But this process, you can only you can't rush it. It's got to, I think both the client decision-making process and the documentation of that process have to run. They have a pace. There's certain cadence that's good and it's healthy. But if it's too rushed, something has to give. And if it takes too long, it becomes inefficient. So the thing that is challenging these days for a business like ours is the entitlement process is, it's a little bit different for every city, and it's kind of more of a start-stop scenario. So, for instance, in Los Angeles right now, if you're building a significant residence in a certain area, you might need to get coastal development approval from the Coastal Commission, a state board, as well as a haul route permit process, separate than your regular permit from the local city. And just recently, they made it such that the soils investigation has to happen and be approved before you can submit the haul route. And the CDP process has to commence and be ratified before you can get final haul route approval. And the long story short with that scenario is it's tacking on 4 to 5 months of a normal process.
Wow.
So you're doing these projects and you're having to, lay them down. You put a team on them and we're moving, and then we get to a certain stage where we have to submit for approval and wait till we get that approval. So part of the challenge with this business right now is juggling that stop-start scenario of these projects. How do you do that? How do you take on, enough work to jog with the ups and downs, but not too much work where you're not delivering?
Yeah.
And we learned a long time ago that there's only two ways in this business that things aren't right. One of them, of course, is not having enough work. That's not fun. But having too much work is only slightly behind that. Having too much work means you're letting your clients down. And these people who are spending millions of dollars, you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Right. I would go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I would imagine for a lot of these projects, you guys are working with an expediter to get through the stuff more quickly and also not have to deal with the headache and the complexity.
Yes. Yeah. It's interesting. The word expediter is a bit of a misnomer now.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that used to mean they could get things done faster. And what it means now is they'll just help the project get through the labyrinth of things that need to get done. but not any faster.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But yes, we do, and we're grateful for them. That's all they do. So yeah, there's a few cities we don't work with expediters, but in California, it's 9 out of 10 projects have expediting.
And you guys do work kind of all over the globe, right? You have projects going on in Dubai, I saw, Hawaii, DC, all over California.
Are most of them in California?
Most of our projects are in California. Yeah, in fact, several years ago, we did a book called California Contemporary that chronicles our main design precepts in our projects. And it is done by Princeton Press and distributed by Chronicle. So it's all over the world. But our book, we said, look, we're Southern California based. Let's just own it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I think they say this is the 12th largest economy in the world. California would be 5th, from a GMP perspective. Mm-hmm. And there is so much work to do here. I always said, I don't get on planes for work. I just get on them for fun. But that changed somewhere in the past few years, 10 years maybe. Not only did our clients mature and take us to different places, but the book came out, and it's really interesting. All around the world, people are interested in California. Yeah. They're interested in what that word is. What's going on there? Food, fashion, architecture. I mean, you name it. In the creative industries, certainly a large part of it is driven by entertainment media, but in the past 10 years, it's driven by almost any creative industry or profession you can think of. So, there's a lot of places, those places you just mentioned, Dubai, down in Barbuda, Antigua, doing a big multi-generational family compound, all around the Rockies. We're doing a lot of work in Montana, Utah. I'll be there tomorrow, actually. Just, a real thirst, even Washington, D.C., doing a fabulous project there. Real interest and thirst for that indoor-outdoor kind of California lifestyle. Now, in some places, there's limited number of months, unlike here, where the only weather we have is June gloom. But it's fascinating how all over the world that kind of California ethos is really sought after. In fact, in Australia, California is an adjective, really? And they use it as an adjective to describe that indoor-outdoor lifestyle. Ferrari in Italy is the only car they've ever named after a place is the California, right? And I told you that Chinese, it's insatiable, the hunger they have for that sort of California mentality. So it's really interesting. It manifests in different ways, but we were surprised how well the book played around the world in terms of people being attracted to our ethos and trying to apply it there. Now I'm on a lot of planes for work, but that's okay. The kids are gone, and it can be fine.
Are there certain things from a design outlook and process standpoint that are consistent from project to project? Obviously design is not necessarily a step-by-step 1 through 10 process, but what are the things that are, I guess another bit phrase of question, what is consistent between the projects in your mind?
Well, what's consistent is our process and the sort of design tenets that we bring from the get-go. So brief explanation of each one. The design tenets that we employ, there's 6 of them. And I won't bore you with all of them, but they range from what we call sculpt to levitate to reveal. The book actually chronicles these really well, but the main idea is that in every project, we're going to bring these sort of 6 tenets to the table. They're not for everyone. Some of them, they definitely describe a more modern lifestyle, but they also are they seek this rather, transcendent or timeless quality. In other words, if we have a project, a potential project in front of us that we're considering, we're absolutely looking for the ability for it to be transcendent, to not be of its time. So if we're getting some notion that the client wants, reclaimed wood, like every restaurant in town, we're out. I used to say it was over-mounted sink bowls, but
okay.
for me, it
seems to have shifted.
For me, it's the faux beam. I just don't get that.
It's tough when you get into the faux territory.
No, I can't do that.
And listen, that's fine for people.
Sure.
Certain people want that, and but what we're really after is the platform to produce something that's, a generational heirloom that'll look just as good when it's done, and maybe even better 20, 30 years from now and beyond. And fortunately, there are a lot of folks out there who think that way, whether it's with materials that are authentic and age gracefully, or the building has a strong sustainable agenda. But it's those kinds of things that we're trying to ensure are present, or will become priorities for the project as it unfolds. And then the process is something where, even though each one of these homes is different, they still subscribe themselves to a process. Certainly the technical stages of the project are more process driven. But even in the very beginning, we have a rather sort of proprietary initial phase to the project where we're not designing anything. We call it the vision process. And it's really about trying to tell the story up front. It's about taking the first couple of weeks and sort of mining the aspects of the what and the why and the who, and what are these clients really trying to do? What's really in their minds? And then digging up what the context is for that particular property. So you're going deeper than, hey, we want this, number of bedrooms or whatnot, and you're going deeper than, oh, here's a nice piece of property that faces southwest and is in this kind of neighborhood. It's the initial sort of attempt to unlock some of the real whys behind the whys, right? In both arenas. And once the ingredients of that story have been teased out, then we're writing that story. I mean, literally creating a story for the project. What is the vision of this project? Not the architecture, the landscape, or what the thing is. It's really hard. We're holding our hands down, no sketching. But, we're sort of doing the archaeological dig before we do the architectural work. Because once you've unearthed that, if you will, you're going to create an authentic story about what this house is. Why it is. What are the personality traits? What are the archetypes? What are the things that are unique to this client and to that property? And you marry those two things together by creating a story. And then everything thereafter is paying attention to that story. Everything that develops, the building's form, the material palette, the landscape, the designer, everything is subscribing itself to that one and only authentic story that was built in the beginning. Then we start the design process. But, it just gives an example of, and we have some interesting tools that we use to tease that story out. It's fun. Clients like it.
That's it's something. Everything you said is, I think, resonates very strongly with the two of us. The question I have is it ever difficult to have clients slow down at the beginning? Because I find that a lot of people, when they hire an architect or designer, they're very excited, as they should be, and they're kind of like, let's go, let's see some sketches, let's design me a house. And what you're describing is, like you said, you're not putting pen to paper necessarily. So is it ever a time where clients are like, wait, what are we doing right now? Like, why are we doing this why phase where you're asking me questions? Why can't you just start for me?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, two sort of trains of thought with that, David. One, as your firm matures, the clientele you will attract will, they'll inevitably not be in such a hurry. It doesn't mean they aren't anxious, or if you could blink and come up with it, they wouldn't be thrilled. They would. But the more mature client you have, the better they are at understanding why you want this process to unfold, rather, certainly not without some urgency, but in an environment where it can be its best.
Mm-hmm.
And we're certainly, I could tell you this 35th year of this business, in the first 15 or so were, everybody's in a hurry. People want to meet on the weekends or late at night. It's all that kind of stuff, right? And when you get to a point in your firm where you can not do that, where you can tell a client, they can sense your confidence in your own process and how to get them in the best place. And you tell them you don't work at nights and on weekends because you have a family too. And you'll start to peel off some of those clients who are thinking you're more of a service and less of an artist. And you'll see that the clients are treating you as a peer, because I'm really good at what I do. That's why I can afford to hire you, but you're really good at what you do too. So this will be fun. Tell me how it works. I remember the day I said, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I can't meet at night on weekends because I'm just not with my kids. This is ridiculous. And I was scared. I said that and I stuck with it. And man, it probably wasn't overnight, but looking back, I was surprised at how quickly our clientele did change.
Mm-hmm.
The folks that, that really, want to do something right, do it the right way, and work with the right entity and have that level of respect for your process are not the ones who are trying to use their off time as your on time.
Right.
It just sort of goes hand in hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Matt Damon never contacted you on the weekend.
He's listed online as being a client.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can tell you that he didn't, because I wouldn't have been available. I don't even text or phone back on the weekends unless there's, something's happening that's unusual or something. But, and I explain it. Tell them why, and I don't think anybody's ever said anything but, I get that. That's great.
Yeah, and I think especially if you're a business owner and you're passionate about what you do have to put some boundaries here and there just to keep your sanity and just have some downtime. Your brain also needs to rest. I don't think you can be fully in it constantly. So it makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's a tough thing because the subject of business and marketing and getting the right projects and the right clients and all of this stuff is something we talk about very often, and I've been interested in for a very long time. And your example of making the switch to where, okay, I'm not going to work at night after a certain point, and I'm not going to work on the weekends, is the same thing as the same struggle I think a lot of creatives have with turning down wrong projects. It's a scary idea to do that, right? Because it's a project by project career and income, and the idea, it's like, well, if I don't take this one on, what if the next one doesn't come through the door? And it's funny because from the older architects we speak with, they all seem to say, like, if you do it, and assuming other things are set up correctly, it actually works out. Like, you have to trust that it's going to work out after a few years or after a period.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's the same thing, by the way, for your fees. You have to pick a threshold at which you're valuing your work. Now, certainly, if your practice is younger, you're your value is going to be lower. But as it matures and as you begin to understand what you're bringing to the table and people are coming to you, you're not knocking on their doors, you've got to set a fee structure that is higher than counting sheets or hours. It's got to be a fee where all of your talent, all of your experience, your intellectual property that you have accumulated through the years, you're giving that to that client. That's worth something. So you have a fee for running the shop, and then you've got a premium on that for that value. And you've got to set that fee structure and stick to it so that you can say to anybody who calls, say, yeah, well, our base fee is 15% of the construction cost. That's soup to nuts. And I say 15%, I don't really want to, that's a lot. It's far more than we've heard. But I also don't want to really be attached to a percentage. You say, that's fine. I understand that we've heard that. But that's the fee that is fair for our compensation and our value and what we bring to the table. And you just have to come back to them with confidence.
Yeah.
It's interesting because most clients, they actually want to pay a good fee. It's like car shopping. Every car has a steering wheel and 4 tires and they all run. But why do they pay so much for that, that fabulous Ferrari that's used on the weekends and everything? Because they value it. It's beautiful. It's the marriage of technology and design is special. It's 3 times the regular car cost, but they value it. And they do the same thing with the folks they hire. They'll pay the fee if you express the confidence that you're bringing that value to the table.
Confidence. It's so funny because we were talking with a theater design consultant on this show who's based in LA a while ago, and he had remarked the same thing. When he was talking about when he started off, he's like the biggest lesson I learned for himself was he's like, I had to be more confident. He's like, looking back, I should have been more confident in the earlier days. You know
who are great at this? Young interior designers.
I know. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You've seen them, right?
100%.
And you marvel, they're young and they're out there just, brimming with confidence and selling the shirt off your back that the client's buying with a premium. It's been interesting through the years. You can exhibit tremendous confidence at any age, but your other interviewee is exactly right. The earlier you do it, the more successful you will be.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
It's the secret ingredient, bar none.
A question I had earlier on, we were talking about the rich history of California modern residential architecture, stemming back to the case study houses. You kind of talked about that some of those principles being passed down or continuing from generation to generation, from whoever it was, to Stephen Ehrlich to you, and then the next line, et cetera. And this is something I've been thinking about more recently, just generally. What in your eyes is what principles or things are consistent or should remain consistent as residential architecture continues in the generations to come, and what things should change, or what things are same and what things are different for you now compared to, let's say, the work of the case study homes, if that makes sense.
Sure. I think, there are those, I would split this up into sort of a group of design principles that are different. And then I would say also sort of the execution principles, or the getting it done part. And taking the latter first, what's interesting, we're going to find tremendous similarities. You take the case study houses, for example, the use of steel was not new. It wasn't, steel and glass wasn't brand new back in the 40s and the 50s. It was really the idea of trying to make it into more of a common kind of mass production. get it up and get it out fast. And there's still a lot of that going on, whether it's the shipping container movement or prefab construction in general, which constitutes a lot of different methodologies for building, but off-site manufacturing components, things of that nature. I think there's definitely some momentum there. There's 3D printing that's certainly going to make its mark. It's already a reality. The Chinese are a bit ahead of us, and other places as well. But that's all here and coming. So I think actually the curve of new methodologies in construction is going to be pretty steep. There's going to be a lot of it. Whereas back in the case study movement, there wasn't as much. It was, hey, we can actually build homes out of steel too, not just the big buildings and the bridges. And we can build it faster and cheaper. And it turns out that not unlike prefab homes, there wasn't a strong enough market for it. So you had to create, if the case study movement was going to succeed as a building type, and we'd see it prolifically, which there are some veins of it that did shoot off and continue. But in terms of the overall vision post-World War II, that this was going to be the answer to that housing, it didn't happen because you couldn't scale it. Couldn't scale the steel and the labor. There just wasn't that kind of. It's kind of like right now we should be framing our homes with steel studs, right? Inexpensive, far more sustainable than the wood product. Straighter.
I was going to say dimensionally stable.
Stable. Yeah. Don't have insect issues, etc. Why does it not happen? It just hasn't. If there was enough momentum in steel, and that became the primary methodology, construction and material methodology for single family homes, be a no-brainer. And it may at some point, but it's had an uphill battle, and that's the same thing for the prefab movement. The real challenge there is, there's no financing for off-site built housing, factory built housing. You cannot get financing up front. There's no conventional lending. So the marketplace, the housing market works off of, conventional loans by almost any bank. And banks love single family homes. It's one of the safest investments out there. So they'll let you put only 20% down and finance 80% of that. But that's a real home on real property. If you have just real property and no real home on it, they're frightened, because if you default, they have a blank piece of land and they can't really resell that very quickly. So this opposite is true too. If you want to build a prefab home in the factory, they're not going to loan you that money up front because it's not a real house on real property yet that they can sell. They're not in the business of selling, a home that's up on wheels.
Interesting.
So what happens is, the conventional financing is completely unavailable to the prefab or offsite built housing market. So there has to be some other kind of alternate financing methodology that comes into play. We worked hard on it, actually, with a Bank of California, actually, and had some investor pools interested in financing that. And then 2008 hit, and the rest was history. Yeah. But that's really what's going to crack that egg eventually. Back to your question about the design process and what's different from back then. Almost everything, from the way technology plays a role in both the design and the documentation, to especially the entitlement proceedings. There, at least in California, I will say, being fortunate enough to do quite a bit of work in other places, even Washington, D.C., right in the city, it's just not nearly as cumbersome. Here we have up and down, especially the coast, but even off the coast, we have so many ordinances and regulations and processes. And what cities are doing is they're increasingly going to having those processes be sequential. They cannot overlap or run concurrently. And that's pushing out timeframes to get approvals by, months and months to years and years. And a lot of it's very intentional. Malibu would be the classic case of this, where, it's 7 years to build a home in Malibu, if that. No
mental.
brokers walking around selling a property telling the client it takes 7 years.
Yeah.
That has to come from us, of course. We're the bad news bears. But,
right.
Malibu has made it virtually impossible to build.
Yeah.
And there's quite a few other entities, nobody quite as bad as them, but most every other place, very, very difficult. So a couple of examples of some of the challenges that are a little bit different than half a century ago. 7
years. That's such a long time to ask anybody to wait for a house.
It's crazy, right? You wouldn't do it. Who knows what your life's going to be like in 7 years?
And at that point, at that scale,
that's their point.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they don't want it. Exactly. No. Final quick question is, what is your favorite building?
That's easy for me. It's not going to shock you or anyone, but I would say Falling Water by Frank Lloyd Wright.
Yeah, I can see that.
But there's a reason for it. There are a lot of, we all grew up and went to, fell asleep in our history class, trying to stay awake from Frank Lloyd Wright and all of his things. And there's something always just really fascinating about the contrast of verticals and horizontals in that beautiful residence that he did. And it's just so very iconic. So one day I had it in my mind that I was going to go there because, I just need to make the pilgrimage.
Yeah.
So I took my middle son with me. I think he was 10. I was 10 at the time. And it is a bit of a pilgrimage. You're going to fly into Pittsburgh and rent a car and you drive down, and Bear runs in the middle of nowhere, and you park and you walk all the way down. And then we finally got around the side of the clearing there, and boom, it's right in front of you, right? Mm. And I just stopped, and my son's holding my hand. He's tugging, "Come on, Dad, let's go. This is your idea," and he looks up at me. He goes, "Dad, why are you crying?" And I didn't even know it. I just, it was to me that's like a great archaeological dig find. It was just so spectacular, and we spent the whole day, and he was so funny. Frank Lloyd Wright built that literally around the rocks, and with the rocks are sometimes furniture in the house. And, the main fireplace has this cooking pot that swings over into it. And I mean, it's just special things everywhere, and it's in really, really great shape. Mm-hmm. And it just was one of those crazy, memorable days. So, at that point in time, I was also working on a project up in the Hollywood Hills, and it was, what we had done with it was good. It just wasn't great. It wasn't quite clicking yet. And it was on that trip and at Falling Water that it occurred to me that we were doing this house on the hill, but it wasn't of the hill. It didn't quite have that response to the context. And when we got back, it was actually on the plane back, an idea sprung from that visit to take the lower walls of this whole complex we were doing and curve them. They were all out of board form concrete. And long story short is that's when the project really got intriguing and kind of took off for me. So there's multiple levels of appreciation and respect for that masterpiece. And that's easily my number one, but there's another 15 or so if you want to keep going.
For the next recording. That's a phenomenal answer. Grant, thank you so much for coming on the show. We super appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you both, Dave and Marina.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching this video on YouTube. If you like what we're doing, then please support our show by hitting that subscribe button and liking and commenting on our videos.
You can also find us on most of the social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're mostly on Instagram. And you can reach out to the hotline, 213-222-6950. You can send a text message or leave a voicemail if you have any reaction to this recording, any questions you might have, or guest suggestion. Feel free to send it our way.
Cool. Thank you for watching, and see you next week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.